Pleased to talk to you today about something that I've been tracking for just over 4 years now in pretty good detail, which is my labs and my blood values. Specifically, I've been using InsideTracker as sort of the primary service in which to do that. So why do I do that? I do it for a very different reason than the people who go into their doctors and get their labs done every year. I do it for athletic performance, I do it for longevity, for mood, for performance, right? I'm really trying to optimize my entire life. And that's sort of who I am, right? I'm a longtime Quantified Self entrepreneur, started Zeo, most recently started a new company called Change Collective. We build mobile lifestyle courses, and you'll see us launch shortly. And most importantly for this presentation, I'm not a doctor. So don't take any of the advice that I do on myself as a given. I've noticed in the standard medical system, they're literally afraid of data, right? When I bring my labs to a doctor, when I bring lots of data, they're like, whoa, dude, you're totally fine. I don't want to see any of this. Until you're sick, I could give a shit. Like, I literally don't care. So when I bring a blood value to them, or I bring a question on something that's fitness related or performance related, they literally don't want to hear me. So what I did instead was went and got my own labs done, and I did that with InsideTracker, who both makes it pretty easy, although you still need to use blood, to get your blood measured, and then gives you a bunch of information on sort of what to do about it. But in addition to the advice of InsideTracker, I also brought in literally my entire network. So Chris Keller, who sits there, his head's over there because I ask him questions, my doctor, the whole internet, my coach. And the first value that I found that was off, this is actually pre-InsideTracker, was I did a wellness screen and my TSH was off. So my thyroid was thoroughly screwed up, and that never would have been tested randomly by my doctor until years later. My second major marker change, you can see my iron was going up, up, up. I, in one reading period, brought it all the way down by doing something that most people wouldn't recommend, which is, sure, I stopped cooking with cast iron pots, I reduced a little bit of red meat, but I gave blood a few times. And it dropped my blood iron like a rock. And so I'm happy with that because it'll mean lower inflammation. To me, this suggests you just need to step outside the box a little bit when you're thinking about how to make change. My vitamin D levels, I try to keep in the sort of like 35 to 45 range. So I regularly measure it, and I both titrate my sun exposure and my vitamin D supplementation. Magnesium, I also take regularly for sort of sleep and relaxation at night. And I titrate my amount of magnesium based on sort of my optimal blood values, and I'm normally within range on it. This is an example of a supplement I've stopped using. So I was supplementing regularly with B vitamins. You can see I was sort of out of my optimal range. I stopped supplementing. Within a couple measurement periods, I was back down to normal. So sometimes it's not best to supplement. Creatine kinase is a measurement of muscular inflammation and fatigue. And so this essentially, I had a really large fear that I was overtraining. And this told me, no, you're not overtraining, keep lifting, you're fine. My cholesterol is high-ish, although you can argue whether my most recent values are well under 200, so are they really high, and my triglycerides are fine. But my major change there was eating more fish and reducing a little bit of red meat in my diet, although I do love red meat. Glucose, this is on my most recent result. What the fuck? I have no idea. I need to fix that. I literally have no idea why that is. And similarly, my testosterone, which is still pretty reasonable at 705, has been dropping in recent test periods. So that's something I also want to look at. So you're now seeing sort of the end of the test period where I haven't yet done any experimentation. Questions?
Time between measurements.
So that period was 3 years. The first couple of measurements were about a year apart, and then the last few were about 6 months. So it's pretty broad, not for any good reason, but because I'm fairly lazy, and I just didn't get the testing done.
So I'm curious about what you started with was the thyroid number, which that's a significant health question, and what happened out of that?
Yeah, so this is actually what led me to doing a lot of my own analysis. I took this thyroid measurement. I went to my normal primary care doc and I showed them this. They said, I'm not going to use this wellness lab result. I'm going to give you another test. Still showed TSH was high. And then, quote her words, do you trust me? I said, yes. She said, take this medication for the rest of your life. That's literally what she said. She was like, I was trying to ask her all these questions about like, well, could I do this? Could I do this? What about this? Do you trust me? Yes. Take this for the rest of your life. That was the last time I saw that doctor. And it led me down the path of, I'm going to use that as one input into my medical decisions and not the whole decision.
But it's hypothyroid or
Yeah. So, right. So I'm taking levothyroxine and properly treating it. But literally, she wasn't willing to even have a conversation about what might be the root cause of that or what my other alternatives were. She was literally like, here's the script. Go do this for the rest of your life.
You are taking medication?
Yeah.
What was your number and what did it come out?
It was, so my TSH was 11 at the peak, and it's now at, it was 3.1 at the latest measurement, and I recently upped my dose a little bit, so I had a retest, and I should be under 2. I hope to be under 2.
I just want to ask,
Yeah?
because the ranges that you're comparing it to exist for a reason, which is the statistical significant
Yep.
threshold of what's good. And so all of the rest of the metrics you're using for other things are based on those similar kind of medically proven metrics.
Yep.
So, like, how does it work between what you think of in your personal range versus the like broader health restriction?
So I'll come back to my like, I'm not enough of a scientist to like dig into the primary research and understand in great detail. So
You're focusing so much on the range, which is why it matters.
I guess maybe I don't understand the question.
If the range is based on, if any of one of those metrics is based on some threshold which is medically proven
Yeah.
and significant in a population, and like how do you measure up your personal interpretation of where you fall in the range
Yeah.
versus like what's safe medically proven?
Yeah. So I guess here's what I'd say. There's a medical range, which is what's medically safe and proven. InsideTracker will use slightly different numbers, which will usually narrow your personal range within the medical range, right? So whereas broadly testosterone might be here for a person of your fitness and et cetera, maybe it's here. And then within that range, of that sort of more optimal range, I usually ask around, right? So I'll read some articles, I'll ask some friends, and I'll decide whether I'm fine being anywhere in that range or whether I specifically, despite the range being fairly large, want to be at the bottom of it or the top of it. So with thyroid, as an example, the medically accepted range is 4.4, is the boundary. However, there's a lot of recent research that suggests that maybe under 2.5 is a better place to be. And I've sort of leaned towards, well, all things being said, maybe I should be under 2.5 rather than 4.4, which is the currently medically accepted. So I sort of use all the data and make my best call. Do I always do it right? No, definitely not. Chris yelled at me today and said my vitamin D levels are too high. And he wanted to see mid-30s rather than mid-40s, which InsideTracker wants to see. So I don't know.
Ben, I'm wondering, so for things like you're puzzled about the changes in the testosterone and the glucose, are you tracking other things that you have or maybe you would like to compare to those results to maybe, draw that connection, things that come to mind, sleep,
Yep.
stress, diet,
Yep.
you know what I mean, that you can bring in and say, oh, okay, these, at least you can establish correlations, maybe not causation.
What I generally try and do, and this I think only works for big changes, is I try and make large binary changes to my behavior. Right? So as an example, get a blood draw every 8 weeks, should reduce my iron level. Right? Eat 3 times as much fish, should reduce my cholesterol level. So I try to avoid, I'm not a good enough self-tracker, and I don't think most people are, to get the precise data that would be required to figure out the 5% changes or the 10% changes. So when I decide I want to make a change, I generally radically shift my behavior, see what happens, and either the radical shift has led to a radical difference, in which case I can still moderate it and get some of the effect, or it makes no difference, in which case, forget it.
So do you have any guesses then, if I'm hearing you correctly, if you're telling me you haven't made any major changes, so things have been consistent, and yet you were seeing the testosterone going down. You saw that.
Yeah.
What do you have any ideas?
Hypotheses on
what's
what that
going on
is?
there? If everything is consistent.
I mean, my first hypothesis is that's just normal variation within a fairly high range, which may be the case. Beyond that, I would go back to maybe I'm overtraining. Maybe I should more regularly measure something like heart rate variability to see if I'm overtraining, even though my CK levels are fine. That'd be another potential hypothesis. My glucose, I have no potential hypothesis on why that's high. It shouldn't be high. I'm a pretty healthy guy. I'll figure it out.
Now, your LDL and your glucose are both high, right? Now,
Yep.
That's indicative of what? Metabolic syndrome.
Yep.
Right? Now, my question to you is that I saw that you're involved with CrossFit, and CrossFit is goes hand in hand with paleo.
Yep.
Right? Now, from personal experience, when I did paleo and I did the low carbohydrate thing, I had the same sort of trend, which I reversed by or it helped a lot by sort of upping my carbs.
Yeah.
Now, is that something that you're?
That actually could be part of the challenge. So like I regularly, I don't know what my sort of ideal carb level is, and I struggle with it all the time. Meaning I'm usually paleo, but between maybe like April and August, I was fairly high carb paleo. And then for 2 months I said, let's try low carb-ish paleo. And now I'm back to like high carb-ish paleo. And I've noticed the way I feel better on a low carb paleo, but maybe it's affecting my blood numbers in a negative way. So
there is that period where your body's adjusting, right? And you can't, you have to give it a fair shot.
Yep. And maybe I haven't given it long enough. So the quick answer is I have the same, I'm very worried, not worried, but I'm very interested in my carb level and whether that's impacting things like glucose, testosterone, and whether I should either be having more healthy carbs or less. I don't know.
Can I ask you, when you had your testosterone drawn, are you aware of the diurnal changes?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, what did your doctor say about that low testosterone and setting up a high TSH?
Oh,
and
this.
glucose and all that?
I mean, it's high from a medical range perspective. It's just low compared to where it was a year and a half ago. So I don't know does anyone know what the reference range is? It was always, yeah, all of them were drawn between 8 and 9 in the morning.
Yeah, so basically the testosterone is in the normal range. But for someone in his age, the gender, ethnicity, and athletic activity is a bit lower. So basically, if you look at testosterone, you can compare someone that is 80 to someone that is 80, and the medical community give the normal range. But basically, your testosterone is dropped like in 2% every year, and nobody in the medical community look at that. So basically, someone that is 18 and someone that is 78 have the same normal range of testosterone. So if you look at the population, we have now thousands of people at InsideTracker, we see that more than 10% of males have testosterone that is lower than the normal range. Basically, they have a testosterone deficient. But apparently, it's too expensive for the medical community to test it, and they are basically ignoring it. And those guys not only have a problem with performance, they have also a problem with basically producing kids or having a sex drive and other issues that basically the medical community ignoring because they test for testosterone.
You must be a low T guy. Are you involved in low T centers?
Not at all.
No, but seriously, that's a very big issue.
Yeah, it's a huge issue.
But low testosterone, I mean, of course there's differences over age. But you changed significantly in a short period.
Yeah, but I'm not, again, like I'd like to know what's going on, but 705 is still pretty high.
Testosterone is
Was
good.
your hematocrit, did your hematocrit go up? Did you check?
Didn't check it.
So have you found a QS-friendly doctor?
More QS-friendly doctors. So I use One Medical, which is a sort of concierge-ish medical service. And my doctor now is perfectly happy to like pour over all of these numbers with me and like have long conversations about it. She's still very set on the Western medical, here's the wide range of normal for an adult male. If you're within it, great. If not, leave my office, or the opposite. Right? Like she's not interested in talking about my testosterone having fallen a bit, but it's still at 705. No interest at all.
Okay.
I would love to find a good one in Boston. I have had some conversations with them, but I've never actually switched over. Do you have a good suggestion? I'll talk to you after, but I would love
By the
to.
way, there's literally one in Boston.
Yeah, yeah.
And he costs, or it's not, you're gonna say that's not true?
I mean, there are a couple, every Visions, oh, I guess
Oh, no,
it's
but,
on
but,
site.
sorry, I meant in Boston. Like Visions
Yeah,
is like
yeah.
25-minute drive.
I will go to the suburbs if I need to, but prefer not to.
Have you looked into using the method called design of experiments, like it's a statistical method? Because basically exactly what you're doing like large binary changes in a number of different variables. There's a statistical method called design of experiments that will actually show you the impact that each of these binary changes is having on whatever variable it is you're trying to measure. So like, it's very, like, I think it is exactly, it would
It's what
show
I'm.
you
It's
the,
what I'm
like,
attempting
one-
to do by
yeah,
eye.
and so like, so
Yeah.
there, I'll send you some info afterwards. but,
Sure.
Like I've done it for research and stuff like that. And it's basically you're looking at like dozens or even hundreds of variables, and you can see which ones have the highest impact in a certain number that you're looking at.
Yeah.
So there's some cool stuff out there, and it's not super hard to use.
Cool.
So just a contextual question as far as
Sure.
the medical system goes. Was there any third-party reimbursement involved? And if not, approximately, how much is the cost?
Yeah. So some of these tests were free because I'm an advisor for InsideTracker, but the lowest price ones are like $199, and the higher priced ones are like $399, $499, right?
The cheapest is $50. Okay, basically what you can do is bring the data from your physician. So that each of you do some tests with your physician, but they give you the details so you can get the more personalized image and get the recommendation of food and stuff that you do some stuff. And the ISDs format.
Yeah.
So, and they're not interested in seeing any of that data or incorporating that into their processes, or just curious.
I mean, my standard doc will do labs when there's a problem, and never otherwise, basically. Right? So if I went to her and complained about low energy and low libido, et cetera, she might test for testosterone. If I complained about whatever, she might test. But I've tried to get them to do stuff like this. No. And frankly, even if they were to give me all those tests, it would probably still cost me more from a copay perspective than it would getting it out of pocket through a service like InsideTracker. Last question?
A couple of comments on numbers. My PSA was always very low, like 1 or under.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden it went from 1 to 3 to 5 to 7. So I went up to the BI and saw the head of the prostate clinic and all that. He said, something's very weird. He says the prostate's very smooth, and your prostate does not feel cancerous at all. He says, I want you to stop all supplements that you're taking for 4 weeks. He says, sometimes there's a trace of estrogen left in the back, and that can totally distort all your readings.
Wow.
Stopped it for a month, went right down to 1. Other thing on cholesterol. My cholesterol about 8-9 years ago was around 210, 220. I'm a pretty healthy guy, still walking 18-hole golf course on. Anyhow, I was in a Greek restaurant, and the doctor was chatting with some other guy. He says, take the highest quality olive oil you can get. He says, not so much in a salad because a lot of the olive oil is left at the bottom. He says, take a couple tablespoons. And so I started doing that, and then I was taking, read somewhere else, taking 1,000 milligrams of niacin. I've been doing this for about 8 years. It went from 220, it averages now about 150, 160, it's been there. All kinds of crazy things that you
Yeah.
can do.
Yeah.
So-
And you got to be willing to do the crazy experiments.
I had to find a doctor that was crazy. I
Yeah.
said, if you're not crazy, I'm not the least bit interested.
Cool.
So I found him.
To crazy people.
All right, thank you.